Hi guys. I've tested numerous multi-shot Bolzon setups in both Players 1 and Players 8 cows over the last few months and wanted to share my insights with you today on which setups are the best value for a very attainable and playable Bolzon. In the videos following this, so not in today's video but in the videos released after this one, I will also cover the very best top tier Bolzon setups for those of you that are swimming in high runes, the best starter setups for those wanting to dip their toes in and try out the Bolzon, and the best niche setups for those that want to try something truly different. All of these will be looked at from a lens of a multi-shot Bolzon, but these points will more or less also apply when using Magic Arrow, Strafe, and Guided Arrow as well. As mentioned, I'll cover the top 3 best value setups that significantly increase the playability of your Bolzon, while not being too far out of reach for you once you have done some good amount of farming to outright find these items or find enough items to trade with. If you're playing a Bolzon that has recently beaten down Hell Bale, you should be able to farm cows, Terror Zones, and Chaos right out of the gate, but not necessarily do so efficiently, so take note of these setups that I'll cover here, as they should be very good upgrades for you to work towards. These builds will cover some key items that will start to multiply your overall damage output, and with this extra stopping power, make you safer overall. Some of the items used in these builds are fairly low hanging fruit and can be traded for without too much difficulty, while other items will take a little bit more time to farm to get to that stage. Before jumping right in, all of these builds will assume using some more basic staple gear such as War Traveler's Boots, Ravenfrost, Cat's Eye Amulet, and Laying of Hands gloves. So on that note, let's jump in and see the top 3 best value multi-shot Bolzon builds. Starting with number 3, we have a Windforce Bolzon with an Act 1 Faith Mercenary. Windforce is a bow that everybody knows about. It is the highest base damage bow in the game and has mana leech, so it's ready to use right out of the gate. When paired with an Act 1 Rogue Mercenary that is wielding a Faith bow, the Windforce Bolzon will have a Fanaticism aura granted to her from her Act 1 Mercenary. This aura will boost the Bolzon's attack speed quite significantly, as well as adding moderate amounts of damage and attack rating to her attacks. We also get to see the rarely used Act 1 Mercenary in action with this setup as well. There are, however, some downsides to this setup, and most notably that the Fanaticism aura has a relatively small radius of effect, and being equipped on a mercenary, the effects of the aura will feel like it's on and off, as it will not always be applied to the Bolzon if she's too far away from her mercenary. This is particularly common when a Bolzon runs and moves onto the next area, leaving behind a mercenary for a brief moment and then having to fight the next group of monsters without the Fanaticism aura at the start of the engagement. This drawback can be overcome by using an Enigma, which grants a teleport skill to the wearer, and where casting teleport will teleport the character and all of her minions, including a mercenary, to the same location. But seeing as we're covering the best value builds, and Enigma is arguably just as hard to obtain as Windforce and Faith combined, this would disqualify this build from this category. The other downside is that the Bolzon loses an extra tank and has to solely rely on a Valkyrie and Decoy to hold back groups of monsters. While both of these downsides are not insurmountable, they are definitely things to remember for this build. At the end of it, using a Windforce while under the effects of Fanaticism to shoot really fast with it is such a good feeling. Next in at number 2, we have a Windforce Bolzon with an Act 2 Might Mercenary using a Pride rune word. This setup takes a standard Windforce Bolzon and pairs it with an Act 2 Mercenary that has 2 auras, Might and Concentration, that boost the Bolzon's damage. Combined, these 2 auras grant the Bolzon with upwards of 600% enhanced damage, which, factoring in Dexterity, Multi-Shot, and other enhanced damage sources, boosts the Bolzon's damage by about 50%, so it's a pretty big deal. On top of this, as both Might and Concentration auras have a much larger radius than Fanaticism, the Bolzon will experience less issues with the auras not being applied to her as she moves about farming each area. Compared to the previous setup, we see both of these benefits shine through and outperform the Windforce and Faith build in the Bolzon build testing runs, both in Players 1 and Players 8 sets of runs. One main drawback for this setup is that it doesn't have a huge amount of attack rating, so maxing out Penetrate and getting a Demon Limb to cast Enchant are ideal steps for her to maximise her chances of hitting monsters. The other drawback is that although Pride itself grants a huge amount of enhanced damage from the aura, the weapon itself does a relatively small amount of damage, so the mercenary is not going to be hitting super hard. That said, Pride does offer the mercenary a decent attack rating boost, and the Hit Blinds target and Hit Freezes target mods do provide some protection for both the Bolzon and the mercenary from time to time. So overall, this build provides a Windforce Bolzon with an even stronger multi-shot attack that hits like a truck while still shooting at a reasonable attack speed. And finally, sitting in first place, we have a Windforce Bolzon using a Reaper's Toll on an Act 2 Mercenary. Reaper's Toll is a popular weapon for Act 2 mercenaries and is very useful for adding a reliable way to proc Decrepify on enemies to lower their physical resistances, as well as making them less threatening. Decrepify will effectively double any physical damage against most enemies in Hell, while simultaneously weakening monsters enough to allow the mercenary to go toe-to-toe with even the strongest mobs of enemies much more comfortably. Reaper's Toll also has Life Leech, which makes the mercenary even more robust during fights. Furthermore, the utility of Decrepify really shines against bosses and makes fighting against physical immune monsters much breezier than the Bolzon having to rely on Magic Arrow alone. Both of these scenarios can otherwise noticeably slow down the pace of Bolzons with even more expensive and harder to obtain gear. To top it off, Reaper's Toll is a respectable weapon in its own right, with decent amounts of damage, deadly strike, and ignores target defense, allowing the mercenary to hit consistently hard. One downside to this setup is that the Bolzon doesn't get all of the sweet auras from the previous two builds that really crank up her raw damage and DPS. And this is not a small loss either, as most of the time is spent farming in areas where, far more often than not, using either of the previous two setups, a multi-shot Bolzon is able to blow away packs of monsters before her mercenary is even able to approach them and start attacking. However, this build still has the Might Aura, and the utility of the Decrepify Curse should definitely not be overlooked, as this is one of the easiest ways for a Bolzon to single-handedly increase her mercenary survivability, as well as increase her comfort in taking down bosses and physical immune monster packs. And doing all this with relatively budget gear that doesn't require any high runes. And it is for that very reason that this build sits in first place as the best value build, because with a Wind Force, Reaper's Toll, and some other basic gear, she can really start to level and farm with confidence, even before items such as a Fortitude Armor become within reach for a player that's using a Bolzon like this one. All that said, just to make things clear and not give you the wrong idea, a Wind Force Bolzon with a Pride rune word will still be a solid upgrade over this build for general farming. However, the Pride rune word needing a number of hard to find runes to make puts that build slightly behind in this category of best value multi-shot Bolzon builds, making the Wind Force and Reaper's Toll Bolzon build sit here in number 1 place. So there you have it, guys. I hope you got a lot out of this video. If you did, then do hit that like button to show your appreciation. If you're playing a multi-shot Bolzon right now and trying to gear up for some farming, feel free to hit me up in the comments section below if you have any questions. Also, do check out the Bowl Discord community. Come and say hello to myself and everybody else there and start hanging out in some games together. As always, if you haven't done so already and want to keep up to date with more Bolzon content, then do subscribe and hit that notification bell. Otherwise, stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.